Hello, everybody. Rokelle Lerner here from Crossroads Centre Antigua. Many of us in the past couple years have lost loved ones to COVID and other tragic causes. And the grief and loss some of us feel sometimes is overwhelming. We know that grief has its own life. And when it comes, it takes us over, and we wonder when we will be ever through with this onslaught. There's no timetable for grief. We may start to feel better in 4 to 6 weeks. That's what research says. But the whole process can last anywhere from 6 months to 4 years. The truth is, we don't know. We may start to feel better in small ways. And with time, it starts to get a little easier to get up in the morning or to have more energy. But truthfully, when we lose someone close to us, that grief never quite disappears, does it? But we do learn to cope with it over time. Some of us have losses that aren't related to somebody passing. We have the loss of health, the loss of financial security, the loss of dreams we had for ourselves, pictures of the way that life was supposed to be. And frankly, I've never met an addict, alcoholic, who doesn't have grief over the losses that their addiction created. There are several coping mechanisms, including talking with loved ones and sharing your pain, engaging in some of your activities again, and consulting with a therapist, of course. We know, though, that grief that is withheld and not recognized can have a real negative impact on us emotionally as well as physically. If we unconsciously push grief away and delay the grieving process and withhold our emotions, they can manifest itself in physical ways that are harmful. Frankly, as a therapist, I can tell you that the limitations of technique is at no time more apparent than when we're sitting with somebody and are faced with their naked grief. When somebody is crying helplessly in the grip of an experience that is too painful for words. When we can say nothing that would not seem presumptuous or trivial. So what do we need from other people when we grieve? It's those who, instead of giving advice, solutions, or cures, can acknowledge the pain and touch our wounds with a very gentle and tender hand. Someone who can be silent in a moment of despair or confusion, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, and just be with us in our loss. The Stages of Grief by Kubler-Ross, which is denial, bargaining, guilt, anger, depression, and acceptance, kind of sounds like a law firm, doesn't it? It's not necessarily what we go through, and certainly are not orderly. And many times people who mean to be helpful just want us to get over it because it makes them feel uncomfortable. I want us to remember, and I want to encourage you to remember, that the love we've received from others never really vanishes. It's that precious connection that keeps us in touch with the gifts we've received from those who have passed. I want to end with a story. This is about Franz Kafka, the brilliant writer and philosopher. When he was an older man, he liked to sit in the park. And one day there was a little girl with tears in her eyes. Kafka asked her, "Well, what's wrong?" And she said, "I lost my doll." Kafka helped her look for it, but couldn't find it. And a few days later, the girl returned, and Kafka told the girl he didn't find the doll, but there's a note from her, and he reads it. And the note said, "I've gone off to travel around the world. Please don't worry about me. I'm fine." So somewhat relieved, the girl returns to the park every week or so, and each time Kafka is there with a note from the doll and tells of the doll's adventures. At some point, Kafka gets ill and goes to the park one last time, but this time he brought a new doll. And he hands it to the girl and says, you know, the travels have really changed her. And some years later, when the girl was packing up to go to college, she finds the doll and reads a note that was curled up in the doll's hand. And the note says, "You will lose the ones you love, but the love will always return in new forms." When we're open to change, ladies and gentlemen, we realize the changelessness that shines through all of us. And trusting that changeless love, that awareness, and living from it is really the source of spiritual hope. Until next time.